David Peterson pitched to jam. The Mets bullpen closed it out, and the New York Mets have won a series for the first time in exactly 3 weeks.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. I've been covering the New York Mets on this show since the 2019 season. This is the only podcast that covers the Mets 7 days a week throughout the regular season. If you want to find some of my written work, you can do so over at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Well, your New York Mets have finally won a series. The dark days may be over. A really impressive win against a very good Brewers team, a team that fields very well. They have a ton of speed, team that's been red hot offensively, has a great bullpen, and the New York Mets were able to win a couple of different ways. They have the big offensive outburst to win game 2 of the doubleheader, and tonight it was your old-fashioned pitcher's duel. Couple of left-handers that know each other very well. I'm sure David Peterson took a lot from pitching alongside Jose Quintana last year, and the two of them went head-to-head in what was really just a great game. I mean, that is, well, of course you can say, oh, the Mets should have scored more runs or whatever it is, and you can, get upset about that if you want to. I love those types of baseball games. I don't think there is a better baseball game when it's just every run matters. Every out is so important. It's going to come down to who can get that late hit against a reliever, which team's bullpen can hold it down and keep that narrow margin of error and hold on to a 1-run lead. And the Mets finally did it. They finally put together a complete game. And it starts with David Peterson because that's what the Mets have been missing. That's been the ingredient that hasn't been there. And on tomorrow's edition of Locked On Mets, I got more injuries to talk about because now Paul Blackburn and Daniel Nunez go down. So that's going to be for Friday's show. Now we're going to focus on the game. But when this team desperately needed somebody to step up, it's the guy that was the stopper who hasn't been the last couple of weeks, David Peterson, who went through a couple of bad starts, and you had to start to wonder, okay, what's going on here? Is this just a bad stretch? Is this David Peterson getting a little bit tired at this stage of the season? I think it was a little bit of that. He gets an extra day of rest going into this start, and it seems like he really was able to use it well. He looked fresh. He was hitting his spots. It was back to the David Peterson we know and love, where he's able to attack the zone. He's able to attack the fringes of the zone, attack just outside of the zone, get some swing and miss, get guys to, miss hit baseballs into the ground and still be able to get a big strikeout when he needs it, but also not the guy that is completely losing the zone like we saw his last couple starts where he's walking batters, or worse, when he's trying to find the zone all of a sudden, getting way too much plate, and then he gets hit hard. This was what we've been seeing all season prior to the last 2 starts with Peterson, and it really does carry the Mets to a win. I mean, that was the difference in this game. They finally got length out of a starting pitcher. But you look at the back and forth through the first 5 innings, and it really was just no offense. Peterson did not allow a hit until the 4th inning. He worked around a 2-out walk in the first inning. He erased a 1-out walk in the second inning by getting an inning-ending double play. Kept the ball on the ground in the 3rd inning, getting 3 straight ground balls to retire the side in order. The 4th inning is when he gave up that first hit, which had a run attached to it. He issued a leadoff walk to William Contreras, struck out Jackson Chourio, then Rhys Hoskins reached on an error by Brett Beatty, a softly hit line drive he should have caught. Peterson then gets a ground ball that, again, not hit very hard, too soft to turn 2. Then another ground ball. It was an infield hit, the first hit that he allows. And Mark Vientos just wasn't able to get there in time. He didn't really make an error, but just didn't get to the ball quick enough. Fielded with his bare hand, and the play wasn't really close. That's how the Brewers get their first run. But then Peterson gets a big strike at the strand 2. 5th inning, David Peterson gives up a leadoff double, still navigates his way around it. Got a couple of ground balls. The second one, Pete Alonso made a good play, solid throw home to cut down a runner that was moving on contact, and that's how Peterson gets through 5. 6th inning, again, a double play ball helps him erase a leadoff single. So you just saw David Peterson trust his defense, attack the zone, the Mets played crisp baseball behind him, and they got just enough offense. Early on, it was Brandon Nimmo who tagged Jose Quintana with a home run. But other than that, you look at what Jose Quintana did through the first 5 innings. You remember that guy. You remember that Bulldog that we watched all of last season who came through in so many big games down the stretch. All he allowed outside of that home run to Nimmo early on was a 2-out single to Starling Marte in the 3rd, then a leadoff single to Mark Vientos in the 5th, which was erased by a double playable off the bat of Luis Torrens. Now, it was the 6th inning where the Mets were finally able to get to Jose Quintana, and it was death by 1,000 cuts. Starling Marte with a base hit. Francisco Lindor, he reached out on a ball that was in the other batter's box, just got enough of it with a vacant hole on the right side, able to get a base hit with Marte going first to third. Juan Soto delivers an RBI single past a diving second baseman, gets into the outfield to score a run, and then they go to the bullpen. They pull Jose Quintana because they wanted Nick Mears, a very good right-handed reliever, to square off against Pete Alonso, and Pete was swinging on the first pitch that he saw, ripped a double off of the wall. Turns out that is the game-winning run for the Mets. They needed all 3 runs, as David Peterson in the 7th inning would give up a home run that cut that lead to just 1. But Peterson overall, again, was brilliant. Ryan Stanek comes on, and he gets a very fortunate out when he relieves Peterson, where there was 2 runners on, 2 outs, a line drive that was ripped right at Mark Vientos. And the New York Mets were able to get through that inning, and then you saw at the end of this game some dominant pitching out of Stanek and Diaz. Again, that 1 out, little bit nerve-wracking to see a ball hit that hard, but Stanek goes out there for the 8th inning, and that was the Ryan Stanek that we saw in the playoffs last year. Ryan Stanek strikes out the side in the 8th on 13 pitches, 11 of them strikes, just attacking the zone, wasn't missing widely as we've seen at times when Stanek goes through one of his cold stretches. This is a very streaky reliever, and he might be on one of those good streaks right now. Huge performance by Stanek to get the ball to Edwin Diaz. And then what we see in the 9th inning is a really awesome play by Luis Torrens that helps the Mets get this victory. These are the wins that the Mets were getting all year, where it's a little bit of contributions from everyone. So with Diaz on the mound in the 9th inning, strikes out the first batter. Christian Yelich, who did not start this game, comes off the bench, gets a base hit, tries to steal on Diaz, which typically is a pretty easy feat. But when Luis Torrens is behind the dish, it is not. Torrens, no wasted movements whatsoever. I mean, absolutely crisp fundamentals, pitch perfect, just gets the pitch. He's already in his motion. He fires down to second base, throw right into the runner. Francisco Lindor, perfect tag. There literally, if there was any little thing that was off on that play, if Lindor waits a little bit too long to receive the ball or gets it a little bit too soon and has to come back, it was as perfect of a caught stealing as you're ever going to see, where Lindor lets the throw do all the work, puts his glove right where it needs to be, so it gets Christian Yelich right in the belly as his hand just barely doesn't get in there. I mean, it was as close of a play as you're going to find, and that really neutralized any threat, because instead of a runner on second base, 1 out, you got 2 outs and nobody on, and then Diaz did the job and struck out Bryce Terang to finish off the game. A massive victory by the New York Mets to finally win a series. Again, the first in 3 weeks. You get the length from your starting pitcher. That was huge. And you get the lights out performance by your high leverage guys, because they're able to come in with a lead. And it's not a situation where Stanek had to come into the game in the 5th inning. It was David Peterson getting you almost all the way there. And that is so critical for a team that just hasn't been getting anything close to that from their starting rotation. So a huge performance by Peterson, who reminds us all, oh yeah, he's kind of been the Mets ace this year. He's back to doing exactly that. And it's what the Mets needed. Now you can take a deep breath. You won a series. You got a chance now to potentially win another one against the Yankees. That's going to be a wild series, because I don't know who's pitching in these games. And again, we'll be talking about that more tomorrow. But I think there's a little bit of a blueprint that the Mets have found here that hopefully can get them through to at least the All-Star break with their head above water. I want to talk about that more in the next segment here in just a minute. Today's episode is brought to you by Supply House. Get the supplies you need from the site that's made for skilled trades, Supply House. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400-plus top brands, you're going to find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll talk to a real person every time. And for trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage. Now it's your turn. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use the promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. If you're watching on YouTube for the live stream today, I appreciate you for tuning in. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any of your upcoming Locked On Mets content. Well, the Mets are going to play a day game against the Yankees for 4th of July on Friday, and we'll see who's going to be pitching in that game. I mean, what the Mets just got hit with today with Blackburn and Daniel Nunez going on the IL. Austin Warren stayed. He was with the team for the doubleheader as the 27th man because you had guys on the injured list. The Mets were free to actually bring some players back onto their roster. So that was the one sort of good thing. I guess the little bit of a silver lining with the injuries today is it allowed them to roster Austin Warren again and roster Justin Hageman again. And they also brought up Rico Garcia. But you're looking at this bullpen. It is cobbled together right now. And I think what the Mets have to really be aware of, and I think Carlos Mendoza has been trying to do this, is just a matter of not having a lot of opportunities to win games. But I think the Mets really have to know when they're deploying Edwin Diaz and be aggressive with it. I mean, you saw Edwin Diaz up in that 8th inning, just in case. And I think the Mets are going to have to lean into the fact that Edwin Diaz is by far their best pitcher right now. And I remember going into last season, I ranked the top 10 most important players on the Mets going into that year. And I remember I ranked Edwin Diaz above Kodai Senga. We didn't know Senga was hurt at the time when I did this episode because I just was looking at the arms of the New York Mets and what they could provide. And I just thought Edwin Diaz being a lights out closer was more valuable than anything else I was able to forecast going into that season. Well, here the Mets are again, where this rotation is a revolving door right now. One of the most undercovered things that has happened with the Mets this season is that Edwin Diaz has found it. Edwin Diaz is pitching like the guy that earned the $100 million contract. He's got a 1.91 ERA right now. He has 49 strikeouts and 33 innings pitched. His whip is below 1. When Edwin Diaz is pitching at this level, it changes the complexion of the game. You know, you saw Diaz coming out to Narco. I felt as confident as I have in a while about Edwin Diaz getting the job done in this game just because of how well he's been pitching and knowing that, you know, this is the guy you want on the mound. And last year, you didn't always feel like that. You thought, okay, well, hopefully Diaz looks good today. And maybe there was points early on in this season where you felt the same way. But when Edwin Diaz is pitching like this, that's a guy that can win you a lot of games. And if you really look at his career, there's been 3 seasons when he's been pitching at this level. And you don't just look at the ERA. The ERA is a good telltale sign, but I think for Edwin Diaz, the thing that jumps out more is the whip. If you look at his whip, which is walks and hits over innings pitched back in 2018, the season that convinced the Mets to trade for him, he pitched to a 1.96 ERA. He saved an an MLB best 57 games on 61 attempts. That year, he struck out 124 batters. Wild. But his whip was 0.79. 2022, when he pitched to a 1.31 ERA to help lead the Mets to 101 wins. He was unbelievable that season. His whip was 0.84. Right now, he's got it down to 0.91. To me, that is indicative of Edwin Diaz when he is at his best. All of a sudden, he's not giving up anything. You look at what he's done over his past 15 games. 0.73 whip. He's given up seven hits in his last 15 innings pitched, only 4 walks, struck out 23 during that time, only 1 earned run across his last 15 games pitched. So right now, if there's one thing that's working for the New York Mets, it's Edwin Diaz. He did not give up a run in May. He gave up 1 run in June, and now here he is so far, pitching very well to start off July. At this stage, you got, 9 games left before the All-Star break? Anytime you got a chance to win a game, Edwin Diaz has to be the answer. Now, granted, you can't pitch him 3 nights in a row, so I don't know if I would expect him to go tomorrow or late tomorrow afternoon. But once you get him rested again, if it requires going to Edwin Diaz for a 6-out save, you got to do what you got to do, because right now this team just has to find their way to wins. At this point, you look at what they were just able to do, beating the Brewers. If you told me at the beginning of this series that over the next 12 games, the Mets were going to win 6, I would have signed up for it. I really would have. And now you've gotten 2 of those 6 wins. I'm not saying I want the Mets to go 4-5 to close out the break. I love for them to win the next 3 series. And then all of a sudden, the Mets very well could be back in first place. They might be right there with the Phillies. But because of what's coming, and again, we're going to talk about this more on tomorrow's show because there's a lot to get into when it comes to how do the Mets navigate this upcoming series without a ton of options as far as starting pitchers they can call on. What are they going to do with Kodai Senga and Sean Manaea? How are they going to get integrated back into the fold? It seems like they actually both could be back before the break. Might not be for much more than a start each, but they could contribute next week. If you're just thinking about getting to that finish line, to me, just get your head above water. Just don't have a rough end. So this was a great start. If the Mets find their way to beat the Yankees, all right, maybe they can really close out the first half strong. But I think more importantly, it's not tripping up more on their way to the finish. And this was a huge step in the right direction to beat a very good team. Hopefully this gets the confidence going in that clubhouse. And the reality is this team can win games different ways. And when David Peterson's on the mound, they can do what they did throughout this season, which is get well-pitched games and win those close ball games, even if they only score 3 runs. But they're also going to have to do a little bit of what they did yesterday, which is swing the bats well. But if they can get the lineup going, if they have the answers at the end of games, if Stanek now is the locked-in 8th inning guy because he's on a hot streak, if Jose Budo continues to pitch really well and you have Edwin Diaz, maybe Reed Garrett needs to be pitching a little bit lower leverage. Maybe he's not the guy to come in with a runner on base. Good that Stanek was able to do that. And hey, it was a 97-mile-per-hour line drive right at Mark Vientos, but he did get out of it. So, and he didn't walk the first guy that he faced like Reed Garrett has sometimes in his last couple appearances. The New York Mets have a couple of different ways that they can win over the next 10 days. And it starts with the offense and it ends with that really good closer you have, Stanek, Budo, hoping that the bullpen can hold on to leads. And then you just got to figure it out on the starting rotation side, because once you get to the break and you come out the other side of it, you should theoretically have a full go rotation of Sean Manaea, Kodai Senga, David Peterson, Clay Holmes, Frankie Montas. That's pretty darn good. You just have to get to that point. And you also might have a Jesse Winker or Francisco Alvarez helping lengthen the lineup as well. So to me, I look at this team, it's just survive mode. Survive and advance, get to that break, and then your roster is going to get some internal reinforcements, and then the deadline's right around the corner after that. This season has never really gotten away from the Mets, even when it felt like it over the last 3 weeks. They finally won a series, and now hopefully they can build off of that and maybe do even better than what I'm describing. Maybe they can win each of these series, and that would be really impressive when you consider all the adversity they're facing. No team has more players on the injured list right now than the New York Mets. Almost all of them are pitchers. That's very tough to see, 4 starting pitchers go down within a month. I mean, that's almost unprecedented, and that's why the Mets have built up the depth that they had that has been tested to the ultimate extreme. We're going to see a lot of Justin Hageman and Brandon Waddell over the next 10 days, and I'll be telling you all about that more on tomorrow's edition of Locked On Mets. Same time as always, you'll see a show up there at 6 o'clock in the morning on YouTube, but on your podcast feeds as well. I appreciate all of you for tuning into this live stream. As always, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Make sure you subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening to the playback, follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow me on social media at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen, your first watch every day. Now for your second watch, head over to Locked On Sports Today, the only show that's streaming 24/7, giving you all the access you'd want into everything going on in the world of sports with the local experts from each team, league-wide experts from each league. By Locked On Sports Today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube.